The sun was lowering over the horizon when the raid came. Hannah Whitfield had always thought the evenings in her little settlement felt safe, wrapped in the glow of lanterns, the hum of crickets, and the distant call of cattle moving back into the corral. But safety was only an illusion on this edge of the frontier. That night shattered everything she thought she knew. She was carrying water from the well when the horses thundered into town. Shouts, screams, and the crack of rifles cut through the dusty calm. Her mother cried out from the porch, urging her to run, but Hannah froze. Shadows swept across the yard. Men on swift ponies, their faces painted, their long hair flying in the wind. The Apache had come. A strong hand seized her arm before she could flee. She gasped, her bucket spilling water into the dirt as she was yanked against a hard chest. For a breathless moment she met the eyes of the man holding her. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his skin bronzed by the sun, his gaze as sharp as a hawk's. Black hair brushed his shoulders, tied with a strip of leather. A band of red paint crossed his cheekbones. His eyes, dark, unreadable, fixed on hers, and Hannah felt the world tilt. He didn't shout. He didn't strike. Instead, he pulled her onto his horse in one swift motion. Before she could scream, they were galloping away from the only home she had ever known. The ride was endless. Wind tore at her hair, dust stung her eyes, and her arms clung instinctively around the warrior's waist as the horse pounded over the plains. She was too terrified to move, too shocked to cry. The sounds of pursuit faded quickly. The Apache rode like the land belonged to him, fast and tireless until the night swallowed them. When at last they slowed, the warrior dismounted and pulled her down. Her legs nearly gave out beneath her. She backed away, her heart hammering, staring at the stranger who had taken her from everything she knew. He said nothing at first, only studied her as though measuring what sort of creature she was. Then in accented English, his voice low and steady, he spoke. "You not scream. You not fight? Why?" Hannah swallowed hard. Her throat was dry. I was afraid." His brow lifted, a flicker of something unreadable in his gaze. He walked around her slowly like a predator circling prey, but his hands remained at his sides. When he stopped in front of her, he gestured to the horse. "You ride. You live." The words made little sense to her trembling mind, but she understood one thing. She was alive. For now. They traveled until dawn, stopping only when the horizon blushed with light. The Apache led her into a canyon, its red cliffs glowing in the sunrise. There, hidden from the open plains, a small camp waited. Hannah's breath caught. Warriors, women, and children moved among the shelters made of poles and hides. Smoke curled from fires and the smell of roasting meat lingered in the cool air. Curious eyes turned toward her, whispers passing from mouth to mouth. Her captor spoke to an elder in their own tongue. Hannah couldn't understand the words, but she recognized the weight of respect in the way others listened when he spoke. This man was no ordinary warrior. When their conversation ended, he returned to her side. "You stay. No harm." But harm already pressed heavy on her heart. She thought of her mother's cry, her father's rifle shot ringing out, her little brother hiding in the barn. Were they alive? Were they searching for her? The questions burned, but she had no answers. As the day passed, she sat apart, watching. Children laughed as they chased one another. Women pounded grain with steady rhythm. Men sharpened arrows and spoke in low voices. This world was so different, yet not as savage as the stories she had heard in whispered warnings. Her captor, she still did not know his name, brought her food, roasted corn and a strip of venison. Hunger overcame fear and she ate, though her hands trembled. When he saw her struggle, he crouched near, his gaze intent. "You think I hurt you?" he asked suddenly. Hannah froze, her heart leaping. Her voice broke as she whispered, "Will it hurt? Will you be gentle?" The words spilled before she could stop them. She meant them in the fear of violence, of what might happen now that she was alone and powerless. But as soon as they left her lips, she realized the double edge of her question, the unspoken vulnerability laid bare. For the first time, his expression shifted. Surprise flickered, then something softer. Something she did not expect from a warrior who had dragged her from her home. "I not hurt you," he said, his voice low, steady, almost solemn. "I protect." That night, Hannah was given a blanket and a place near the fire. She curled up, staring at the stars above the canyon. Exhaustion weighed heavy, but sleep did not come easily. She thought of the man, his unreadable eyes, his steady hands, his words. Why had he spared her? Why had he taken her at all? When she finally drifted into restless dreams, She woke once to find him sitting not far away, a silent guardian with a blade resting across his knees, his gaze fixed on the darkness beyond the firelight, safe and yet not safe, captive and yet not broken. And in the quiet between heartbeats, Hannah felt the first flicker of something she could not name. Something dangerous, something that would change everything. Hannah awoke to the sound of morning voices and the smell of smoke rising from cook fires. For a moment she thought it was only a dream, that she would open her eyes to the familiar rafters of her family's cabin, her mother's voice calling her to breakfast, her brother's laughter in the yard. But the harsh sunlight struck her face, and when she sat up, the truth crashed down on her. She was still in the Apache camp. Children darted between shelters. Women carried pots of water from the stream, and men readied their ponies with silent efficiency. She drew her blanket tighter around herself, watching with wide eyes. The world around her was alive, ordered, strangely beautiful, but she was a stranger in its heart. Then she saw him. The warrior who had taken her was speaking with another man, his hand resting easily on the hilt of his knife. His hair glinted blue-black in the light, his posture tall and commanding. He did not smile, but his eyes, when they turned briefly toward her, were sharp and steady, as though he saw every breath she took. Hannah looked away quickly, her cheeks burning. Later he approached her, carrying a small clay bowl filled with warm broth. He set it in her hands, then crouched down so his gaze met hers. "You eat," he said simply. Her fingers trembled as she gripped the bowl. She stared into the steam, then dared a glance at him. Why did you take me?" His brow furrowed as though the question was strange to him. "You belong to my horse now," he answered, his voice measured. "Horse carry two, Apache and you. That mean you live." It was no answer at all, yet it was the only one she would get. Still, his words carried a strange kind of logic. He had chosen her, but not for cruelty, it seemed. She thought of the way he had spoken last night, his vow of protection. Perhaps he meant it when she whispered, "Will you keep me here forever?" He tilted his head, studying her. Then softly he asked, "Do you fear me?" The question stole her breath. "Yes," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I do." He did not smile, nor did he seem angered. Instead, he nodded once, firmly, as though her answer was the most honest thing she could have said. "Good," he murmured. "Fear keep you alive." As the days passed, Hannah's terror did not vanish, but it shifted. She was no longer afraid of being struck or dishonored as she had first imagined. Instead, she feared the unknown, the way her heart reacted when his shadow fell across her, when his eyes lingered on her a moment too long, when his voice, low and steady, spoke her name, which he had learned from the lips of another prisoner before. "Hannah," he would say, as if testing the sound, his accent shaping it into something both foreign and familiar. And each time, her heart stuttered. The women of the camp did not treat her with cruelty. Some looked at her with suspicion, others with indifference. A few of the younger ones even offered her food or pointed where she might fetch water. Still, she remained apart, a curiosity, a captured bird in a cage woven of open sky and red stone. One evening, he brought her to the edge of the canyon where the land stretched endless and wild. The sun burned orange, shadows deepening across the ridges. "You see," he said, sweeping a hand across the horizon. "Apache land. All this, all free." Hannah swallowed hard. "It's beautiful," she admitted almost against her will. He glanced at her, a flicker of satisfaction in his gaze. "You think Apache only fight, only kill," he said. "But we love this land. We live with it." His words startled her. She had always heard of the Apache as raiders, savages, merciless in battle. Yet here was a man speaking of love for the earth. The wind, the sky, when she looked at him, truly looked. She saw not just a warrior, but a man tied to his people, his home, his way of life. And that realization unsettled her more than anything else. That night, by the fire, her thoughts twisted into fear again. She could not understand her captor. He was both her enemy and her protector. She wanted to hate him, yet her heart betrayed her with every glance, every whispered word. When he approached, sitting beside her, she whispered the question that haunted her. "Why are you gentle with me? You could hurt me." His eyes narrowed, and for a long moment he said nothing. The firelight flickered against his face, casting deep shadows across his cheekbones. Finally, he answered, his voice low. A man who hurts one who cannot fight. He is not a man. He is nothing. The words struck her like a blow. She had not expected such honor, such pride in his tone. Slowly, her fear began to change. It did not vanish, but it twisted into something else, something more dangerous. Curiosity. In the days that followed, she watched him constantly. The way he moved with the grace of a mountain cat. The way children ran to him, laughing, tugging at his arms. The way the other warriors respected him without question. She realized he was not just a captor. He was a leader, and she, against every instinct, was drawn to him. One evening, when the camp grew quiet, she whispered again, her voice trembling, "Will it hurt? Will you be gentle?" This time the question was not only about fear. It was about the dangerous curiosity building inside her, about the way her heart beat faster when his eyes lingered on hers. For the first time, his lips curved into the faintest trace of a smile. "I will always be gentle," he said. And in that moment, Hannah realized the walls she had built inside her heart were beginning to crumble. The days stretched into weeks, though Hannah lost count of time inside the canyon walls. At first, she had marked each sunrise as one day closer to escape, one step nearer to freedom. But the further she lived among the Apache, the more tangled her heart became. Her captor, whose name she had learned was Kohana, was not the monster she had been taught to fear. He was stern, yes, with a presence that commanded respect. But he was also patient, thoughtful, and strangely protective of her. She saw it in the way he shielded her when strangers from other bands visited the camp. His stance firm and possessive, his eyes warning others to keep their distance. She felt it when he showed her how to carry water from the stream without spilling, his hands steady over hers. She heard it in his low voice when he spoke her name as though it belonged to him. At first, Hannah resisted every kindness, clinging to her anger. She avoided his eyes, refused food he brought, sat stiff whenever he came near, but little by little her defenses began to crumble. One morning, he placed a length of rawhide in her hands and gestured toward the women weaving baskets. "You learn," he said. She stared at the strip of leather, then at him. Why, his mouth curved slightly. "You stay, you work, you live." It was not the freedom she longed for, but it was something, and when she joined the women, awkwardly fumbling with the rawhide, a young girl giggled and gently corrected her. For the first time, Hannah felt less like a captive and more like something else. Kohana began teaching her the ways of the land. He showed her how to listen for the rustle of a snake in the grass, how to tell fresh tracks from old ones, how to recognize edible roots from poisonous. "You hear the earth," he told her one afternoon as they crouched beside the stream. "It speaks to you if you listen." Hannah listened, and to her surprise, she began to understand. At night, when the fire crackled and the stars blazed above the canyon, he told her stories in broken English, tales of his people, of spirits that guarded the mountains, of battles fought and brothers lost. His voice was low, carrying the rhythm of tradition, and she told him stories too, of her family's cabin, of her mother's pies, of the church bell that rang each Sunday in her town. He listened without judgment, his eyes never leaving hers. It was on one of those nights that she realized her fear had changed into something entirely different. She was sitting close to the fire, the blanket pulled around her shoulders. Kohana sat opposite, sharpening his knife. The firelight played over his face, highlighting the strength of his jaw, the intensity of his gaze. When she caught herself staring too long, she quickly looked away, her cheeks burning. But his voice broke the silence. "You look at me," he said. "Why?" her heart stuttered. She shook her head. "I wasn't—" "Yes," he interrupted gently. "You look." Hannah swallowed hard, unable to answer. She had no words for the storm inside her chest. He leaned forward slightly, his gaze steady. "You fear me still?" She hesitated, then whispered the truth. "No, not anymore." For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Then slowly he nodded, as though her words had changed something between them. The next day, he took her riding. She sat behind him on the horse, her arms wrapped around his waist, the wind tugging at her hair. At first she held herself stiff, but as the ride stretched on, she found herself leaning closer, breathing in the scent of leather, smoke, and sun that clung to him. They rode through endless plains, across streams that sparkled in the sunlight, past hills where wildflowers nodded in the breeze. The land was vast, untamed, alive, and she realized for the first time she was not thinking of escape. That evening as they returned, Hannah asked him softly, "Why did you take me?" Kohana was silent for a long while. The fire crackled between them when he finally answered. "When I saw you," he said, his voice low, "you were not afraid like the others. Your eyes, they did not close. They looked back at me." Hannah blinked, startled. She remembered that moment. The terror, yes, but also the strange pull when their eyes met. "I take you," he continued, "because something tell me you belong to me." Her breath caught. His words were not cruel, not forceful, but spoken as though it were a truth he could not deny. Her heart raced, and though she should have recoiled, she felt a heat rise in her chest instead. As summer deepened, their bond grew stronger. The women began to accept her more, teaching her tasks, laughing gently at her clumsy efforts. The children tugged at her skirts, eager for stories of her old home. But it was with Kohana that she felt the greatest change. He no longer treated her as a prisoner. He sought her out by the fire, walked beside her to the stream, placed food in her hands before taking any for himself. He spoke little, but when he did, his words carried weight. And one night, when she whispered the question that had haunted her since the beginning, "Will it hurt? Will you be gentle?" he reached out slowly and brushed a strand of hair from her face. His touch was light, reverent. "I will be gentle," he promised. "Always." Her breath shuddered, and in that moment, Hannah knew her heart was no longer her own. The summer sun burned high, casting long shadows across the canyon walls. By now, Hannah no longer felt like a stranger among the Apache. Her hands bore small scars from weaving rawhide and grinding maize. Her hair carried the scent of wood smoke, and her heart was bound to Kohana in ways she could scarcely admit even to herself. Yet the world outside the canyon had not forgotten her. One evening, as the camp prepared for rest, a rider burst through the canyon entrance. His horse was lathered with sweat, his voice sharp as he shouted in Apache. Warriors leapt to their feet, grabbing bows and rifles. Children scurried into shelters. Hannah's pulse quickened. She caught fragments of words in the hurried exchange, but one word she understood clearly: soldiers. Kohana's expression turned grim. He barked orders, his tone firm and commanding. Warriors armed themselves, preparing to defend their home. Hannah stood frozen, her blanket clutched tight as fear crept up her spine. The soldiers, her people, were coming. That night, Kohana came to her side. His face was shadowed in firelight, his dark eyes unreadable. "You must stay hidden," he told her in low English. "They come for you. They come for war." Her heart twisted. She thought of her father, her mother, her little brother. Were they part of the search? Were they alive? Tears filled her eyes. "If they find me, if I go back, what then?" Kohana's jaw clenched. He looked away, then back at her, his gaze fierce. "They take you. They call you safe. But they will kill my people. Kill me." His words pierced her chest. She had longed for rescue, for the familiar comfort of home. But now the thought of leaving Kohana, of watching him fall beneath the guns of soldiers, felt like a knife driven into her heart. At dawn, dust clouds rose on the horizon. Hannah stood on a ridge with Kohana, watching a line of riders approach across the open plain. The glint of rifles and the flash of sunlight on polished buttons marked them clearly as soldiers. She recognized the flag they carried, its stars and stripes snapping in the wind. A lump formed in her throat. That flag had once meant safety, belonging. Now it brought only dread. Kohana placed a hand on her arm. "Go inside," he said. "Do not let them see you." But Hannah shook her head. "No, I can't hide. They'll think you've harmed me. They'll kill you all." His eyes burned into hers. "If you go to them, you never return. You understand?" She understood too well. The soldiers entered the canyon cautiously, rifles ready. Their leader, a stern man with a heavy mustache, raised a hand. "We've come for the girl," he shouted. "Release her and no blood will be shed." Gasps rippled through the camp. Eyes turned to Hannah, who stood trembling beside Kohana. The soldier's gaze fixed on her. "Miss Whitfield, your family sent us. Come now, we'll take you home." Her knees weakened. Home. The word ached in her chest. She thought of her mother's gentle touch, her father's stern but loving eyes, her little brother's laugh. She could return. She could be safe again. But as she glanced at Kohana, standing tall, defiant, his hand steady on his bow, Another truth struck her. She no longer belonged only to the world she had left behind. Her heart belonged here too. "Please," the officer called again, softer this time. "Don't be afraid. We'll keep you safe." Hannah's breath came shallow. She turned, her eyes meeting Kohana's. "Go," he said quietly, though his voice was strained. "You have family. They need you." Her throat tightened. She could see the conflict in his eyes, the pain he hid beneath his stoic mask. He would let her go. He would sacrifice his heart to give her back her life. And in that instant, Hannah knew her choice. She stepped forward, her voice carrying clear across the canyon. "No." The soldiers shifted uneasily. The officer frowned. "What do you mean, no?" Hannah's chest rose and fell with the force of her words. "These people have not harmed me. They have cared for me, protected me." She glanced at Kohana, her voice trembling but firm. "He has protected me." Murmurs rippled through both camps. The officer scowled. "Miss Whitfield, you're frightened. You don't know what you're saying." "I do," she cried. "I know exactly what I'm saying. I will not go with you." Gasps echoed from the Apache, disbelief from the soldiers. Hannah stood trembling, but her eyes blazed with conviction. Kohana's hand brushed hers just barely, a silent thread of connection that told her he understood. The officer's face hardened. "You've been bewitched. You don't know your own mind." "And seize her!" Rifles lifted. Warriors shouted. The canyon filled with tension so thick it was ready to shatter. Before the soldiers could move, Kohana stepped in front of Hannah, his bow drawn, his body a living shield. "You take her," he growled in English. "You take my life first." For a long, frozen heartbeat, no one moved. Then, slowly, Hannah stepped out from behind him. Her voice rang with desperate courage. "If you fire, you'll have to kill me too." The words struck the air like lightning. Soldiers hesitated, confusion flashing across their faces. This was not the broken captive they had imagined. It was a woman who had made her choice. At last, the officer cursed under his breath, gesturing sharply. "Fall back!" Reluctantly, the soldiers lowered their rifles, retreating out of the canyon. Dust rose behind them as they vanished back into the plains. Silence fell. Hannah's body trembled, her breath ragged. She had never felt so terrified nor so free. The Apache murmured among themselves, astonishment in their voices. Kohana turned to her slowly, his dark eyes filled with something she had never seen before, both pride and awe. "You choose," he said softly. Hannah swallowed hard, tears stinging her eyes. "Yes, I choose you." For a moment neither spoke. Then with a reverence that made her heart ache, he touched her cheek with the back of his hand. "You are brave," he whispered, "braver than many warriors." And in that touch, that gaze, Hannah knew the truth. Her loyalty was no longer divided. She had chosen her heart no matter the cost. The canyon was quieter after the soldiers left, but the air carried a different weight now, an awareness that nothing would ever be the same. Hannah had made her choice before the world, and the echo of her words still pulsed inside her chest. "I choose you." The Apache regarded her with new eyes. No longer just a captive, no longer a fragile outsider, she was now something else, someone who had stood against her own people for them. Some nodded with respect when they passed her. Others still whispered with suspicion. But none dared challenge Kohana, whose presence beside her was as unyielding as stone. That night, as the fire painted shadows across the canyon walls, Hannah sat beside him in silence. The events of the day weighed heavy on her. She had defied the world she had been born into, severed ties with family and home. A part of her ached with grief for what she had lost. But another part, stronger, fiercer, burned with a sense of freedom she had never known. Kohana broke the silence at last. "You spoke with courage today, like warrior." Hannah turned to him, her eyes shimmering in the firelight. "I was terrified." He studied her quietly, then shook his head. "Courage is not without fear. Courage is choosing in spite of fear." His words sank deep, wrapping around her heart. She lowered her gaze, her voice soft. "I don't know what tomorrow will bring. My people will call me a traitor. Yours may never accept me." Kohana reached out, his hand resting gently against hers. "You walk hard path, but you do not walk alone." The following weeks tested those words. The Apache lived always with the shadow of soldiers and settlers encroaching on their land. Raids came more often, whispers of war hung in the air. And Hannah, though safe under Kohana's protection, felt the tension of eyes that judged her. One evening, as women gathered corn near the stream, an older woman spoke sharply in Apache, her gaze cutting toward Hannah. Though Hannah didn't understand the words, the scorn in them was clear. The others fell silent, watching. Kohana's sister, a woman named Tala, stepped forward, her voice firm as she answered. The two exchanged heated words before the elder stalked away, leaving Hannah flushed with shame. Later, Hannah asked Kohana what had been said. He was quiet a long moment before answering. She said, "You do not belong, that you are danger to us." The words stung, though Hannah had already guessed their meaning. "And your sister?" She said, "You are strong," Kohana replied simply. "She said you saved my life, saved all of us when you spoke against soldiers." Hannah's throat tightened. Slowly, she nodded. "Some will never accept," Kohana said, "but others will see." His gaze softened as he added, "I see." As summer turned toward autumn, Hannah began to feel less like an intruder and more like a part of the life around her. She helped gather firewood, carried water, even began to learn words in Apache. The children laughed at her clumsy pronunciation, but their laughter was kind, and she laughed with them. But it was in the quiet moments with Kohana that her heart truly changed. He showed her how to ride bareback, how to steady her breathing when stringing a bow. He taught her to see the land not as wilderness but as home, a living spirit that provided if treated with respect. At night, when the stars spread endless above, he told her stories of his ancestors. And Hannah found herself telling him dreams she had never confessed to anyone. Her longing for freedom, her fear of being caged by the expectations of her town, her yearning to live a life that was truly her own. Each word bound them closer. Each glance carried weight unspoken. Then came the night of the council fire. Warriors gathered to speak of what was to come. Soldiers pressed closer. More settlers claimed land, and the threat of bloodshed loomed large. Hannah sat on the edge listening as voices rose in anger and sorrow. Some argued to move deeper into the mountains. Others demanded war. At last, one elder turned his gaze on her. He spoke in Apache, his tone sharp, his hand pointing toward her. Hannah froze, her cheeks burning. She did not understand the words, but she knew the meaning. Why is she here? What claim does she have among us? Kohana stood, his voice ringing out over the fire. He spoke with passion, his words cutting through the debate. Hannah caught fragments: honor, courage, choice. When he finished, silence fell. Then slowly, one by one, heads nodded. Not all, but enough. And for the first time, Hannah felt the stirrings of belonging. That night, after the council, Kohana led her away from the fire, up a trail that wound along the cliffs. The moon bathed the canyon in silver, the wind whispering against the rocks. They stopped at a ledge overlooking the valley. Below them, the campfires glowed like fallen stars. Hannah turned to him, her heart pounding. "What did you tell them?" "When they questioned me." He studied her in the moonlight, his expression unreadable. Then slowly he said, "I told them you are my choice, my heart, my wife, if you will stay." Her breath caught. "Your wife?" Kohana's gaze was steady. "I cannot promise you peace. I cannot promise you safety. But I can promise you my life. My strength, my heart." Tears blurred her vision. She had imagined many endings when she was first taken. Death, rescue, despair. Never this. Never love, fierce and wild, born from fire and fear. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "Yes, I will stay." The following morning, the camp gathered. Words were spoken, vows made in the Apache way. There were no church bells, no white dresses, no hymns sung. Only fire, earth, sky, and the quiet promises between two souls who had found each other against all odds. When Kohana placed a beaded necklace around her neck, a symbol of union, Hannah felt the weight of it as both anchor and freedom. She was no longer the frightened girl who had whispered, "Will it hurt? Will you be gentle?" She was a woman who had chosen her path, her heart, her future. Seasons would change, dangers would come. The soldiers would not stop, and the clash of two worlds would not vanish overnight. But in the heart of the canyon, Hannah and Kohana stood together, bound not by fear or captivity, but by choice. And that was the ending no one had imagined, not a tale of tragedy, nor of rescue, but of love born where it should never have survived.